This video is brought to you by Harold Sack, who gave me a massive 1 year's worth of subscriptions on Patreon. Zimone Paradox Sculptor versus Selvala, Phenax, and Edgar Markov. A 2-lander with no ramp, bristly bill, not doing much of anything on its own. I think we can do better than this. Alright, that's looking a bit more promising. We can at least abuse our commander a little bit with 1000-Year Elixir. Evolution Sage to proliferate as well, let's keep. Turn 1 Esper Sentinel for the Selvala deck. And we draw into yet another land with the Rogue's Passage, so yeah, I was going to save the fetch for the Evolution Sage to get more proliferate, but we've got plenty of turns to draw into more landfalls, so go for our typical hedge maze play. And there we see a Boseiju. I think we're okay to throw in the graveyard because we've got plenty of lands. Indulgent Aristocrat, a turn 1 vampire being played into Edgar Markov, so makes a vampire token. Jace's Erasure triggers the Esper Sentinel for the first time. And this is an enchantment that has a target player mill a card, not each opponent, so not going to have to worry too much about that necessarily. Double white held up for the Celestia player, and we see a turn 2 play, Simic Ascendancy, or we can get down Evolution Sage. I suppose there's not much harm in playing that into landfall for proliferate, especially if Simic Ascendancy is already in place, so let's go Hinterland Harbour and get the enchantment in. Does mean Esper Sentinel is going to draw another card though. 2 1/1s being thrown in towards the Selvala deck. Does not make a block. And the Mardu player is still just stuck on double black, but I dare say most of the deck is black in a vampire tribal list. So not being forced to sacrifice his Indulgent Aristocrat to have it survive the Esper Sentinel, he instead goes for a Demonic Tutor. Jace's Erasure triggering for the first time on the draw step and is also pointed at Selvala, milling a Soul Warden. Mindcrank is one to be more fearful of, and decides to pay the tax on Esper Sentinel this time. The first commander we see, Selvala, Explorer returned hit in play after managing to make a forest, so we're free to throw down our Yavimaya now, I think. Does have to discard down to hand size though, has 9 in hand at the cleanup step. So we see hit the graveyard, Rite of Harmony, which does have flashback of 4, and Angel of Destiny. Heroic Intervention we draw into, so we don't necessarily have to take too much life to the Ancient Tomb if we can get the Yavimaya into play as well. So I think 1000-Year Elixir and pay the Esper Sentinel tax is fine. That does mean that we're going to mill some cards because we do lose life to the Ancient Tomb. See the back of a Lux Cannon unfortunately, and the Lightning Greaves. I kind of scoffed at this commander at first because I thought it was just going to be generic plus counter theme, but the fact that you can double up counters on artifacts as well, such as the Lux Cannon, does make it more interesting, so hopefully we'll see some artifact play during this game. Now the 2 vampires are heading in towards us, which means we lose more life to the Mindcrank. Milling goes a Bread for the Hunt and a fetch land. We do have the Evolution Witness, I think it's called. Put plus counters on it, you can fish permanents out of your graveyard, so hopefully we don't mill that. The mill from Jace's Erasure being pointed at Selvala, and mills a Gala Greeters. I was debating whether or not to put that into this deck. Zelik's going to see the mill and make a Black Horror token every time a player does. Quest for Renewal for Selvala, and of course decides to have us all draw a card, so we get into yet another land, and Jace's Erasure pointed at Edgar Markov this time. The first quest counter placed on the Quest for Renewal. This needs 4 counters on it to be relevant. And there was 2 green mana floated there. Mana Confluence milled. Revealed over here a Dusk Legion Sergeant, a land, and a Path of Discovery, which allows our opponent into a Cultivate with that 3 mana. And making a land with that Authority of the Consuls will finish the turn off. So I think it's probably best to get down our Zimone next turn if it's going to enter tapped. This is creatures, not enchantments, just creatures, okay. Yeah, I think we're not going to make use of the pseudo haste with 1000-Year Elixir with that enchantment in play. It's a shame we haven't drawn into the Ozolith before now, but yeah, let's go Yavimaya so that we don't have to put life into the Ancient Tomb, because we do have to consider the Mindcrank. and it can be our commander. So enters tapped, gains our opponent his first life from the consoles, going above his starting life total. And Zimone will put the first plus counter onto itself, only one creature to target at the moment. But that will trigger for the first time as well. The Simic Ascendancy needs 20 counters on this in order to win us the game. Minas Tirith, played by the Vampire player, and gets down a Phyrexian Arena, so not paying the tax on the Esper Sentinel. That's drawn a lot of cards this game. Jace's Erasure pointed back at Selvala, and then another 3 cards being milled by the Celestia player, thanks to Zelix. Milled a Kodama's Reach previously. So already down to 75 cards left in the deck, and that was just a bunch of lands. Then a Folio of Fancies again triggers the Esper Sentinel, and again letting him draw. So with that, each player draws 1 card, 1 put into X, and that triggers Jace's Erasure. We get into Manamo, more means of untapping our commander. Mill pointed at the Vampire player again, and mills a Swamp. Activating Selvala again straight away, and Jace's Erasure, for the first time I think, pointed at us. We draw into an Arcane Denial, which we'd rather our opponents didn't know about. A Bloodline Keeper, a Sewer Nemesis for the mill deck, and you have a Maya Cradle of Growth revealed by the Celestia deck. So we are milled a Rishkar, and that will make the first horror token for Zelix. 3 green mana floating from the commander. Trostani, Celestia's Voice, they've obviously gone for some kind of life gain theme. And there we see a payoff for it, Resplendent Angel, so gaining 3 life, needs 5 life in order to make an angel. So I think they've gained 6 this turn, they're at 48 anyway. The Esper Sentinel swinging in for the first time at Phenax. And yeah, there we go, Resplendent Angel triggering to make a 4/4 angel, which gains even more life into Trostani. So 52 life at the end of the turn. And there we see a Season of Gathering, so I'm not sure if we want to use that to wipe out enchantments or artifacts yet, really. Let's maybe see about continuing to set up, so we can go for the Evolution Sage and the Ozolith. We'd have to take life to the Mindcrank if we want the Evolution Sage to see landfall, but I think that's worth it here. So we'll go down to 33, mill ourselves twice, and we see Freed from the Real, a combo piece, and Gemstone Array. So if we'd drawn into both of those, then it would have been looking pretty good for us to make infinite mana. But we'll play the Sage, Authority of the Consuls, make sure it comes in tapped. Then we can play the Ozolith in order to make sure that we get multiple plus counters every time we decide to place plus counters on something. Esper Sentinel, our opponent's getting plenty of cards as is, and we want to make sure to get landfall at the correct time, so not going to pay the tax on that. They go up to 9 with double green available. And now we'll go through to the beginning of combat so that Zimone can trigger, and that can place a couple of plus counters on Zimone, a couple on the Sage as well, which triggers the Simic Ascendancy a couple of times. So that already a quarter of the way full, up to 5 on the Simic Ascendancy, and we're not going to bother attacking him, we just want to make sure to get landfall into play. So I won't worry my opponents too much with a Manamo for now, we haven't actually activated our commander yet. Let's go Flooded Grove, and that will proliferate to the landfall like we said we wanted to, so only going to select 3 permanents here this early in the game. So this jumps up to 6, and then it is 2 more plus counters each, taking this up to 10, so halfway there. Anyway, losing a life to the Phyrexian Arena at the upkeep means that our opponent has to mill a Door of Destinies. Anointed Procession for the Vampire deck means, of course, when he does finally get to playing another Vampire, he's going to make twice as many tokens, pays the tax on the Sentinel, drawing into Jace's Erasure, having Markov Mill and Exquisite Blood, getting rid of 1/2 of his 2-card combo. Plenty of variants of this classic combo nowadays though. Multiple creatures that you can still play into it. And then we see an Extract from Darkness. Each player mills 2, you can put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So gets from us, hopefully doesn't reanimate the Vorinclex because that will switch off our counters. Hardened Scales is milled, Shizo and a Swords to Plowshares, Duskmantle Guildmage and Bruvak. Duskmantle, is this the one that combos with the Mindcrank? Yes it is. And then over here it looks like it was Celestine and Birds of Paradise decided to reanimate the Gala Greeters in order to get himself into treasure tokens, I'm guessing. Anyway, has managed to trigger his Zelix a few times for some horror tokens, is creating a tapped treasure token, and Authority of the Consuls gaining life yet again. I think we're going to be largely ignoring the life gain. Noteworthy that with the Soul Sister this does trigger at the end of each end step, so could be relevant with something like Authority of the Consuls if someone gets enough creatures down. Decides to gain himself 2 life with the Gala Greeters as well, because tokens are entering into that. And with the final resolution of the Zelix, it is the final activation or trigger of the Gala Greeters, a plus counter this time, along with more life from the Consuls, ending at 57 life. Horror token swings in to the left. Mind Crank sees the life gain due to no blocks and mills again, taking him down to 75 and losing out on the Phyrexian Tower. Didn't see any kind of enchantment destruction from the 2 forests that were held up at least. Not to say with 11 cards in hand that he isn't going to point any at the Simic Ascendancy though. Even if he does have something, probably leave it for another turn if needs be. Activating the commander in order to have all of us draw. We see a Sink into Stupor, a Banner of Kinship I haven't seen played yet, another Swamp, and a Snow-Covered Plains. Jace's Erasure pointed at the Vampire player again, which gets rid of the Blood Tithe Harvester, triggering the Zelix again for another token, and the Match Made in Heaven, triggering the Gala Greeters when a token enters. So with that made a treasure token and gain more life with the Consuls. Then Austere Command, all enchantments and artifacts on that, so there goes our combos. It was a long shot. We needed to untap really so that we could go for like Arcane Denial and Heroic Intervention on stuff like that. Populating with Tristani onto the Angel token will automatically gain enough life for the Resplendent Angel, because he's already gained life from the Authority of the Consuls. 10 cards in hand and swings in the 4/4 straight down the middle. And with another Angel entering with the Resplendent Angel at the end of the turn, he ends his turn at 68 life. And with all of our opponents tapped out, we draw into yet another land, so I think we're potentially just playing at instant speed, or do we go for the Season of Gathering, just tap out this turn? We'll draw far too many cards potentially, but at least we can craft a perfect hand of some kind. So maybe we just take a turn off here. Problem is we're not holding up any kind of interaction or anything, and it might be that players are looking for board wipes at this point. So let's go Minamo now. That will trigger the Evolution Stage for Populate. And do we go for another plus counter onto this to try and garner favour from this player? I think that should be reasonably harmless. So at that point I think we're just trying to hope that someone goes for a board wipe, and worst case scenario we can go Inspiring Call just to draw a couple of cards. Could do that right now I suppose. Yeah, it's potentially a waste of the Inspiring Call if we do see a board wipe, but I'll go for it now. Alright, Incubation Druid, I wouldn't mind getting down either, so yeah, let's do that. And now at least we can hold up Heroic Intervention and the Arcane Denial. And we've managed to progress our mana a little bit after drawing into even more lands, so Incubation Druid, Evolution Sage can have the counters. And that means that this thing is going to tap down for 3 mana next turn. Not going to bother swinging in, we're just going to try and look like we're not much of a threat to anyone. This way as well, if we don't use any of our interaction, we can at least use Zimone's ability for the first time and double up some plus counters. Maybe even start to make Zimone a bit of a threat when it comes to commander damage. Skull Clamp is fine. So Skull Clamping onto the Indulgent Aristocrat as opposed to the token. Maybe looking for some kind of mass reanimation. 11 cards in hand, not sure what he's fishing for. Diabolic Intent is, I think, the second tutor he's played. Hasn't he already gone for a... Yes, he's already played a Demonic Tutor, which I assume was for the Phyrexian Arena. So maybe this is the board wipe, and we'll have to wait another turn cycle to see it. Leaving himself wide open potentially though. Does make an Urborg. And there we see the Blasphemous Edict, so that's going to get around Heroic Intervention. We're going to have to use our Arcane Denial on that, I think. First time I've seen the Blasphemous Edict played though. And now he's wide open to attacks. So Arcane Denial triggering at the end of the turn, which means we get to draw a card. The Vamp player will draw 2. And you'll never guess what we draw into, yet another land. Might be actually that we can proliferate enough and trigger our commander enough to one-shot the Selesnya player out of the game next turn, because we do get Vigilance with the Season of Gathering, so we might be able to knock this player out next turn. All depends on what the next 2 turns hold for us, of course. Targeting the vampire player for mill with Zelix again. There's a vampire tribal list, so you'd assume that he would hit creatures with that. A captivating vampire, 3-tree city, and caretaker's talent, and that encourages that player to scoop, just can't handle it anymore. I was expecting him to scoop to the counter on the board wipe, to be honest. So makes a horror token into a tapped treasure token from the Gala Greeters, and hopefully the angel and the horror player keep swinging in towards each other here in order to buy us a turn or 2. Making blocks, only getting a 1/1 horror token through really. The 3/3 Gala Greeters is going to go back into the graveyard that it came from in the first place. No combat tricks, just holding the 7 cards in hand. Memory Plunder now. You may cast a target instant or sorcery from an opponent's graveyard without paying the cost. Luckily that board wipe's gone. Although there's another one here that I forgot about, or steer commands, so I'm hoping we don't see the creatures go down. But there we go, all creatures wiped out, so we are back to where we started. And if the vampire player had had some patience for a few steps, then he might have actually seen the board wipe and been able to carry on playing it out. Selvala back into play again, and has 3 mana left up in order to get himself into a Viridian Revel. Well, didn't manage to see any of those treasures cracked, unfortunately. This is a card that could be recommended that a lot of players run from now on, thanks to all the treasure and food and all the rest of it that is getting cracked nowadays, but might get some use out of seeing the treasures go down. A Sky Shroud claim for us. I'm not really sure what we're doing. Maybe just get our commander back online. So we'll just play Polluted Delta. That can tap down for green. Then we can make a couple of untapped lands. Gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 for our commander again. I think that's fine. So we'll Sky Shroud claim first. And then in for Zimone once again. Just been on the back foot by a turn or so most of the game, unfortunately. So hopefully we'll make it round a turn cycle to actually make use of Sink into Stupor and Heroic Intervention, cards like that. In all fairness, we've seen multiple board wipes though. Arcane Signet for Phenax. And then we saw revealed previously the Sewer Nemesis points that at the Selesnya player, so is a 20/20, because apparently there's 20 cards in the graveyard over there. Now, with the Rogue's Passage, we can point this at any creature. There's no guarantee, of course, that it wouldn't swing in towards us, but we could strike some kind of deal and have this swing over here. Still going to have to hit multiple times in order to knock down that life total, though. This is why our commander damage may have been pivotal. That dies straight away, gaining a bunch of life. In the process, at least, a Swords to Plowshares. I might have waited on that personally, although letting a blue player untap might not be the best thing. A Smothering Tithe. We'll see all of us draw a card to the Selvala and make a bunch of treasure. Does this trigger on... Yeah, it's only on an opponent's artifact put into the graveyard. We draw into yet another land, Otawara, getting completely flooded this game. And we saw previously revealed to us the Path of Discovery as well, so that enters play. Revealed to Selvala, by the way, the Exemplar of Light. And we see a Crypt Incursion over here. So we don't want to see a land, please. But of course, that's exactly what we draw into. So in that case, let's go through to... Yeah, I think just one-shotting with the Zimone would be an idea, so... I'm risking not playing the Rogue's Passage because I want to surprise my opponents with it for commander damage. There's always a risk that we see a wheel and don't get to play it though. Let's just play the Yavimaya Coast, hold up the Otawara potentially. And I'm thinking that we're going to get as many plus counters on Zimone as possible this turn so that we can draw equal to the power with Season of Gathering. And with this we can wipe out all the artifacts and enchantments as well. So go through to combat to get a counter on Zimone. And then we are not attacking because we want to make use of the tap ability a few times. So we'll target Zimone with her own ability, doubling the plus counters on her, making her a 5/8. And then we can untap with the Manamo, paying a single blue in order to do that. Do we want to do this though? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Won't be able to hold up the Heroic Intervention. So do we just add multiple counters with this? Or we could just draw cards and use the board wipe. I think that's going to be the thing to do. Yeah, I think we're just going to have to risk not having Heroic Intervention held up. If we lose out on Zimone, then so be it. We will untap our commander. Although saying that, I haven't done the maths properly, have I? I've got it in my head that I can double it again before casting the Season of Gathering, but we can't apparently. Oh well, could have just held up that mana and done it at instant speed for blocks and held up the Heroic Intervention as well. So it is draw equal to power, and then we will wipe out the enchantments, I think. Could be that we draw into an offer you can't refuse, so maybe I should hold up the mana for that, but we could also draw into the Fierce Guardianship, so I'll just tap out here. Selvala is holding up priority, so could have a means of getting rid of Zimone. One of the good things about Season of Gathering is that our opponent doesn't know if we're choosing Artifact or Enchantment, so might make plays based around the wrong assumption, but is cracking his treasure right now in order to play a 5-drop Solitude or something like that maybe? Is that the name of the card? A Wandering Rescuer. Other tapped creatures you control have hexproof, so just trying to protect his commander. That will explore when it enters and shows us an Ajani's Pridemate with the new artwork. So we'll name Enchantment. Maybe he was assuming we were going to go for Artifact there, but he's kind of forced our hand either way. Unbeknownst to him, we were always going to go Enchantment there though. And that draws us into a bunch, finally something decent. The Return of the Wild Speaker, Transmogrifying Wand should be really good. So if we can keep Zimone in play, the toughness on our commander should be relevant with the last March of the Ents. Let's get rid of some lands here. We're down to 58 cards left in the library. Somehow the Celestia player has more than us at 68. Phenax entering play for the first time, followed by Eoreth. So yeah, that's decent toughness. Can untap the Phenax with that as well. Exemplar of Light we saw revealed previously, and getting it into play for some more card draw. Activates the Selvala straight away to gain a life, puts a plus counter on this and draws. Gets us into a Sol Ring. We see Perplex over here, and an Essence Warden for our opponent. Plays the Essence Warden immediately, and then at some point has played a Thespian Stage, so makes a copy of our Manamo, and the 4/5 double strike goes into the mill player. Okay, let's see if we can actually do anything here. Alright, a Mossborn Hydra, that's pretty good. We could use the Otawara to bounce this. It's 5 mana, so they could just afford to recast it again annoyingly. I was thinking of removing Hexproof from this. We could always do it the other way around and go Transmogrifying Wand onto this and then bounce the Celestia creature so that it can't come in and tap again straight away, assuming it doesn't get haste. I think we go Transmogrifying Wand here. Let's see about Mossborn Hydra as well. We can double up the counters on both of those. Not sure how much mana I need, so I'm just taking the life to the Ancient Tomb, which isn't a good habit to get into, but we'll hope it doesn't matter. Essence Warden triggers on that, which will, yeah, that's a good combo with the Exemplar of Light, drawing a card to that. So we'll play out the Sol Ring into Transmogrifying Wand. Then we can play a land for the turn, Rogue's Passage. We're just going to have to show our opponents, unfortunately, doubling up the counters on Mossborn Hydra for the first time. And now our opponent doing something in response might make it so that we don't have to... Yeah, Heliod's Intervention can get rid of our stuff. So we go Heroic Intervention here, I think. And that way the Arcane Signet still gets blown up at least. So now Otawara is 3 mana. Yeah, that kind of screws up our turn a little bit, but at least we can potentially get rid of this. Can we do this at instant speed? No, only as a sorcery. So if we want to see the back of Selvala, then we'll have to do it now. Or do we want to just blow this up instead so that it doesn't keep coming back? Yeah, I think we'll do that and try and encourage the Dimir player to point targeted removal at Selvala. So we'll go through to combat in order to get the additional plus counters. I suppose I could have waited on landfall actually, because we missed out on a plus counter or two with the Mossborn Hydra. Again, this does mean that we're not holding up the Sink into Stupor. Yeah, we can always double at instant speed if we want to. Yeah, let's just go for using a counter now. That way we can hold up Sink into Stupor and the double ability at instant speed. So during our opponent's turns, holding up the Sink into Stupor, Otawara, and our commander's ability. Problem is our opponents know that we have Otawara and Sink into Stupor because we got them from the Selvala. So are we really going to encourage Phenax to use his spot removal or not? Eoreth pointed at us. So we mill a Nature's Law, more lands, and there's the Fierce Guardianship. And then a Propaganda. I dare say that the life game player would start looking in our direction now anyway. So obviously decided to allow the Selvala to untap here, because I'm thinking we're just going to double up the counters on the Wand and the Hydra. Then that way, if we decide to go for the last March of the Ents next turn, at least if someone removes Zimone, then we'll at least still draw cards off the Hydra, hopefully. Minamo has untapped on our opponent's side of the field though. There's also a Field of Ruin. Should be playing Demolition Field, but tapped it down anyway. A Rite of Harmony, our opponent decides to flash that back. He's going to see some creatures this turn apparently. 3 cards in hand. And making some additional mana with the Castle Garenbrig, I assume. And Archangel of Thuum, we can always bounce back if it becomes too much of a problem. It will trigger the Essence Warden immediately, as well as the Rite of Harmony for a cantrip. So a plus counter on everything, another plus counter on the Exemplar, and that will also draw a card. So with 2 mana available, they're up to 4 in hand and 75 life. So he revealed a Rock's Faith Mender from the commander, a Swamp once again over here, and we draw into Replicating Ring. We would wanted to have seen it way before now. We do have rocks that care about counters, but just haven't seen them unfortunately. So this now a 10/10 Arcane Signet into play, followed by a Serra's Ascendant, well and truly has the buff on that. Yeah, if our opponent hadn't gone for the board wipe previously, we would have had rid of this player a long time ago, but maybe he wasn't aware that we were able to go for commander damage. So another Esper Sentinel trigger puts plus counters on everything, and I don't think we're going to be able to take 12 life unfortunately. Gets down Cleric class now, when he's been gaining life all turn. That is going to trigger the Rite of Harmony as well because it's an enchantment. So sticking at 4 cards in hand. Maybe he's only just drawn into it off the Rite of Harmony. Now let's see where these attacks go, because he might force our hand here. Yep, that comes in towards us along with the Ox, as we assume they would. Then decides to pull back the Ox and take it in towards the Dimir player instead. So it's going to have to be Otawara onto the Exemplar, I think, and decides to leave the Ox back after all. So we're not necessarily going to make landfall next turn, but let's go for the bounce on the Exemplar. And now let's see what we can do, if anything. A Breeding Pool for us to shock him for the turn, I think. Not sure if we want to do that now or not, because might be of some relevance when we get landfall down, because obviously we need to consider the triggers on this. But I think we'll get it in now, because last March of the Ents, like I said, so yeah, shock it in, because once again I don't know how much mana we need this turn. I don't plan out my turns that vigorously. So that's up to a 6/6, we'll draw at least 6 cards from last March of the Ents. I don't think we're going to get enough counters for commander damage this turn with Zimone, so I'll tap it down. We can untap it with Minamo anyway. So target Mossborn Hydra and the Transmogrifying Wand, and that doubles that up to a 12/12. 4 counters on the wand now. And let's cast last March of the Ents. Only 18 creatures in this list, but surely we'll draw into something decent. Well, there's a Crystalline Crawler and a Colonian Hydra, not the best, but they're free at least. Triggering the Essence Warden for more triggers on the Archangel of Thuum. Maybe should have blown this thing up before that. Can only do this at sorcery speed. Could always go for this at instant speed. We've got the Magistrate Scepter as well. That's going to be too slow, unfortunately. Real mana-hungry deck, this. We'll just let them have the plus counters, I think. Noteworthy that this doesn't have any plus counters on it right now, because we've not cast it, put any colours into it. So we can hold up Reality Shift, Sink into Stupor, Beast Within. Use the Transmogrifying Wand is going to be intelligent, I think, although we've given too many plus counters to our opponent. But I think we'll go for that now. Getting another creature triggers this for another life. We're at 84 at the moment. Just holding back the 12/12 as a blocker is going to be the intelligent move, I think. So at the moment we can hold up Manamo and the ability on Zimone. So let's just pass at this. Zimone can put a counter on the Crystalline Crawler just in case that's relevant. We can get a combo with that maybe. And we'll make it so Colonian Hydra can swing in more comfortably as well. Much as I'd like to go for the Magistrate Scepter, I think it's going to be too slow here. Although it's pretty much the only unique thing that we've got for this video at the moment, so I'll hold on to it. Not necessarily a good reason, but hey ho. So I'll ditch the Cultivate even though it's more landfall next turn, which might be of some relevance with the Mossborn Hydra. Mind Skinner proved to be a reasonably popular commander as I understand, but I never got a chance to make it. Has low toughness but does have decent devotion, so able to animate the Phenax who targets us for a mill for 7. 31 cards left in our library after this. And then untapping the Phenax. Don't think he got anything of relevance all that much really. The Millennium Calendar. Phenax targeting us again. So we go down to 24. There's Doubling Season, which would be relevant with the Magistrate Scepter. Still haven't seen that 3-mana green creature that digs stuff out of the graveyard, so maybe we'll draw into that if we're lucky. But noteworthy, our opponent did all that at sorcery speed when he could have done it at instant speed, I think. So yeah, he can do that anytime he wants. Maybe encouraging this player to go in after us, but I don't know, if we're about to get milled, then I'm not sure where the Celestia player is going to be looking really. Exemplar of Light into play again, and once again we'll trigger immediately, thanks to the Essence Warden. So up to 6 cards in hand. Rock's Faith Mender doubles up the life gain. Then levelling up the Cleric class, I think that is plus counters when you gain life, yes it is. So 4 cards in hand, a single white mana held up. And taps down his commander immediately for life gain and a plus counter. See an island over here. We draw into Prime Speaker's Agana, which we will have to be very careful with. And it was a Sarith over here for more hexproof. Never ended up blowing up the commander anyway. So this, now a 10-10 lifelink. If it swings in towards us, we'll blow it up. Not making use of that double green that he made though, apparently. And it does swing in towards us, as we expected. So if we go 2 mana for the Reality Shift, then we'll have 1, 2, 3 left up, which we can't necessarily do anything with unless we want to use another piece of spot removal. Seems as though players are gunning for us here, so we might have to. So it's Reality Shift in order to exile that thing. Gains a life from the creature entering, puts a counter on the Ox token. And we're just being forced to interact here. It would have been nice to untap the Zimone again. I don't know, maybe we could have taken the damage there and done this anyway. Anyway, we'll see what we can do here. Let's maybe Beast Within as well. Let's Beast Within onto this thing so that they don't have as much devotion. Gonna have to remove the only counter from the Crystalline Crawler, which does gain another life from the Essence Warden. Triggers on any creature entering. And another plus counter from Cleric class. Puts that onto the Ox token again. We draw down to 22 cards in the library here. And there is a Fathom Mage. We're drawing into our card draw towards the end of the game, unfortunately. But we can still get a decent amount of damage through with the Mossborn Hydra and a fetch. So what can we do here? Let's drop a land straight away. We've got the plus counter doubling from the Colonian Hydra as well to consider. This is doubled up to a 24-24. We've got a couple of fetches we can crack, making that a 48-48 and 96-96 trample creature. Can take this guy out, so if we double this up to a 12 power creature with its own ability, it's doubled up to a 24-24 unblockable. If we can put the Rogue's Passage onto it and swing in with this, that assumes that we're going to land with this, which Sink into Stupor should allow, hopefully. So let's go for the Swiftfoot Boots now and hope that we can land it on Zimone. We can land it on Zimone. So now it's target creature can't be blocked. Then we target her with her own ability. And we'll target the Colonian Hydra as well. So now it's a 10-10 and an 11-14. Have to untap our commander with the Manamo. And now it's a case of we'll crack our 2 fetches one at a time so that we can hold up Sink into Stupor just in case it's relevant. We need to get an island with polluted delta, so we'll get our penultimate forest with the misty rainforest. Just doing this to trigger this up to a 48-48. We'll do that again. Held onto these fetches all game, thanks to the Yavimaya. So now a 96-96 is about to be doubled again, hopefully, with Colonian Hydra. We're kind of reliant on that at this point. Noteworthy, we do have a bit of a number, I've noticed, with Power Matters draw, because we can gain so much power in this deck. We can easily deck ourselves with something like the Mossborn Hydra, but by the time you're doubling up plus counters, we'll hope that it's not of any relevance. So Zimone can just target the Colonian Hydra and the Zimone. Then it's through to attacks, and finally getting that commander damage off on the Celestia player, we hope. The Hydra can go into the left, and that Hydra can go into the left as well, just in case this doesn't pan out the way we want it to. Oh, of course, we have to pay the tax, don't we? So let me go like that. Colonian Hydra will have to swing to the right. So this does mean that we're not holding up Sink into Stupor. Let's risk it just for the fun of it. The play really is to... should have put a plus counter on this instead of the Colonian Hydra previously, so that we could have held up the Sink into Stupor, but we'll just see what happens here. See if we're punished. We'll at least get rid of one player, I think. The Colonian Hydra is allowed to attack in and double up the plus counters. So I've got a 22-22, a 192 power and toughness creature. The commander is now 23 power, and we'll hope that that can at least take the Celestia player out here. Potentially punished here. Tapping down triple black, we're potentially going to be punished for not putting additional mana on the Crystalline Crawler. Exile all creatures from a player's graveyard, gain 3 life, that's fine. So they go up to 68, but they're still facing down this thing. Deciding to make blocks, it's commander damage that we're concerned with, so it might be of some relevance if they don't go down to the commander for some reason. Never know, the Dimir player might do something. So they go up to 120 life as soon as we hit them for 23 commander. And there we go, managed to get the one shot after all, even if it was a few turns too late. Getting to see the hands of our opponents as well. We knew quite a few cards. I knew that the Celestia player had a few lands that I wasn't keeping track of. They had this Snow Forest for most of the game. But yeah, managed to drag the game out for just long enough in order to finally get into the card draw and actually make something happen there. Very interactive game in the early one, but was looking forward to playing with Zimone once I thought about it for a bit and saw that you could do some plus counter shenanigans as well as artifact counter shenanigans. Didn't see too much from the artifacts there, unfortunately. Couldn't have the board stick around long enough, but you get the idea with this deck. And if you do want to see more from it, then be sure to let me know, as ever. Massive thank you to the patrons for their support of the channel as well. And thanks to most of the opponents for actually playing it out for once as well. I'm Tribalkai. Thank you for watching.